Episode number 188 of Sunday Gold's, a Florida State baseball podcast. Now on the airwaves, Ariya Masudi, Brett Nevitt, and a very special guest joining us here as we get you set for postseason baseball at Dick Howser Stadium. It's none other than Chris Nee of Noles247.com. Chris, my friend, welcome to the show. Good to have you back on Sunday Golds.
Appreciate it. Good to see you guys in this setting.
Absolutely. Brett, before we jump into breaking down the regional here, I think that's the game plan. Let's break down the four teams, and then let's talk a little bit about who Florida State should start in game one on Friday in the opener. And then let's talk about expectations for this regional and other news and notes as we get set for another regional in Tallahassee. Before we do that, thanks to our sponsors at Alumni Hall and at Metro Deli. They've been friends of our program, have done such a great job with us. At Alumni Hall, if you use the code SG15, they'll give you 15% off your entire purchase. So I've heard a lot of people are already buying tickets for the regional coming into Tallahassee. Stop by Alumni Hall or go online, alumnihall.com, and use that code SG15 to get 15% off. Let them know Sunday Gold sent you. And Metro Deli, if you're looking for a bite this week in Tallahassee, great sandwiches. The cheeseburger wrap's one of my favorites. I get it on Thursdays, and Johnny Mack, who is now the new zookeeper of the animals, he'll be there to greet you with a very friendly face and a Go Noles as well. So Alumni Hall, Metro Deli, they keep this podcast going. And those of you watching on YouTube and all over social media, we appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to Brett's YouTube page where we continue to post these things out. You can follow us in Sunday Golds on social media as well as Noles247. And those of you listening on Apple, Spotify, Google, everywhere else you get your favorite pods, please subscribe and download the podcast. Brett, what were your thoughts when you saw Selection Monday come around and the Noles get the 10 seed paired with the 7 seed Alabama? For me, overall, I think it went about as well as it possibly could have, all things considered, when you talk about where the Noles were going to be seated and who they were paired with.
Yeah, I thought coming out of it, it seemed pretty favorable as it could be, being a 10 seed. And I thought that being a 10 seed was completely fair. When we talked on the pod, I didn't really think that they were really in the top 8 conversation after they went 0-1 at the tournament. So I thought they would be 10 or 11. And I think we thought that they would probably be paired up with Alabama. And I think of the teams in that group that you would potentially face, Alabama was the team that we thought that would be the best matchup for them, just looking at the stats. And that's not to say Alabama's a bad team. All those teams are good teams. But when you just go and look at those stats, it seems like a team that FSU can match up with well. And really across the board in their regional too, none of these teams are really high-scoring teams. I think the thing that you're afraid of FSU facing is a team that can kind of run away from them offensively, even though FSU's strength is their pitching staff. You just know that FSU's offense isn't really going to be able to keep up with the team that's super high scoring over a few games, I think. So I think with these teams, I mean, you basically are the highest scoring team of the teams in your regional, which I don't think people would have expected. Even without Miles, I think it's like right around the same for you and a couple of these teams. And obviously you play the hardest competition. So I think it worked out pretty well for them. And now it's just about trying to take care of business and then maybe hoping that Oklahoma State or someone else can win at Alabama.
Nee, what were your thoughts, initial impressions when you saw Florida State pop up as the 10 overall seed, and then you saw they were paired with Tuscaloosa and Alabama at the 7?
Similar to Brett's in most cases. You know, I thought FSU would end up 9-10, somewhere in that ballpark. I did not think they would be top 8. My main thing is I really didn't want to match with Texas or Florida, who I knew were contenders for those spots opposite them. Alabama was probably the one that I viewed as most favorable, though Alabama is a good team, and certainly that will be a challenge if FSU does end up in Tuscaloosa. The main other thing I remember from watching the selection show was I thought UNC got a really hard regional. I just remember that like off the bat, watching it in real time. That was one of those thoughts that immediately came to me. And then, of course, Arkansas not getting one was probably the most other interesting, notable thing. Not that they necessarily deserved it, but I thought they would end up being one. But when we saw Kansas and West Virginia go up there, that made it pretty clear they were not going to be. As for the teams that are coming to Tallahassee with Coastal, NIU, St. John's, thought it was very favorable draw. Coastal is one of those teams that they're good, they're capable. Fluky is a wild card for them. I don't know. We'll get into that. I think they're a battle-tested team. Like, to me, it is FSU and Coastal in this regional. That's going to make it very interesting. NIU and St. John's should be handled as the kind of AQs that they are.
Yeah, fair points. Totally there. And as I was musing through the possibilities for Florida State on Monday, I thought if the Noles got an 8 seed, it was because you could have pointed to some of their conference metrics and their RPI, strength of schedule. And then, having the athletic director be the selection chair never hurts your case. And I think 10 was very fair in the end because, you could have been 9, and that's not as favorable as a draw probably as being the 10 paired with Alabama. And I had a few people ask me, had the Noles won, a game against Pitt, and then had they maybe beaten North Carolina, what would that have changed? And I said, I think at that point you might have seen Florida State at 7 or 8, and Alabama still paired with them at either 9 or 10, and they would have flopped. And committees have a way of being able to navigate the conversation however they'd like to be able to justify some of the decisions that they make. So, I do think those 4 teams in the end were very close. And then, Chris, to your point, watching some of the different regionals come out and realizing what the committee was doing in terms of trying to make sure that 2 SEC teams didn't match up in supers. And so you saw Oregon at an 11, which made no sense at all to me. They had North Carolina and I think Texas A&M, if I'm not mistaken, matched up with each other, which a lot of people had A&M a little bit higher on their board. So there's always jostling, right, of what people want. Auburn was a 4 seed, which peculiar to me. It's a good baseball team that didn't have a better resume than North Carolina. But then I realized what was going on. And so it would have been interesting to see what Florida State could have got had they beaten Pitt and maybe a North Carolina. But all things considered, you're probably playing who you were always going to play. And my guess is for the last 2 weeks, this is where we've been trending in terms of the Noles and the Crimson Tide, and who hosted and who was on the road might have been able to be navigated. But those are 2 teams that are very similar to each other, that rely on their pitching to be able to help them win ball games. And I think we'll see what Alabama's home atmosphere is like if they win their regional and Florida State wins its regional. As you guys look at St. John's, let's start with St. John's because that's who Florida State plays first. I think it's very important not to bury the lead, right, of a podcast. And I think on everybody's mind right now is who would you start in game 1 against the Red Storm? And I think Link Jarrett has shown, Brett, in the past at Notre Dame and at Florida State that he does prefer to use his number 2 or number 3 option and not use his number 1 in game 1. And the reason is to try and best position yourself for winning the regional. I expect that to be the case again this weekend. I don't think they'll go Mendez on Friday. So those options end up being Trey Beard or Bryson Moore. And I like the way both guys match up against St. John's, but when we look at the metrics of what St. John's does, and they don't strike out a lot, they put the ball in play. And then you look at the recent form of some of these guys who have been pitching. Bryson Moore seems to make a lot of sense, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's trying to figure out between Moore and Beard most likely. And you think Mendez is going to get that second game. And to me, it's just, I think the big thing against a team like St. John's and any 4 seed that you play is you're trying to avoid the big inning because that feels like the way you lose is like you give up a big inning and you can't overcome that. And, I think this year consistently Moore has been the guy that's been able to avoid the big inning compared to Beard just because of being able to limit the home runs compared to him. I think Beard's given up 11 homers in 12 starts and Moore's only given up 6, I think, and both of Moore's last 2 starts have been really good. I think in those last 2 starts, he's gone 13.2 innings and only given up 3 runs between the 2 of them, and he's been super efficient in those 2 outings and commanding the ball really, really well. So for me, it would be Moore because of the command with the fastball the last 2 times he's been out there and the way he's pitched the last 2 times, and I just feel like he's consistently given them longer outings this year, which you're hoping to get some length in that first game of the weekend to save some of your bullpen arms. Now, Moore doesn't go very deep on the pitch count, but with the way he's been able to be efficient, he's been able to go 6+ innings or at least 5 innings pretty consistently, going about 80 or so pitches. So I just think the consistency of his season versus kind of the ups and downs with Beard would ultimately be why I would choose Moore for myself game one, because I feel like even though he's been their number 3 starter in the order throughout the year, I feel like he has performed as their number 2 starter. And with kind of the reset for both those guys now, you have the opportunity to line them up however you want them to.
Yeah, to me, it was Beard or Moore. Those were the only 2 you were considering. I threw out that it would be Beard, in my opinion, the other day, like on Monday when this topic first came up, mostly because he's the number 2. But I do agree with Brett regarding Moore being kind of the more consistent of the 2. For me, I think it comes down to when Link and company, specifically Micah Posey, are discussing this situation, it's probably matchups as much as anything. Which guy matches up with the opponent better for you and sets you up to have the most success out of the gate while conserving your bullpen? I think you also consider the bullpen in this. John Abraham should be back. Obviously, he's a guy that can give you multiple innings. He's kind of, Mr. Go-to first out of bullpen. You also have Peyton Manka back, who, depending on how much they've been able to stretch him out, should be able to give you multiple innings. So you do have some options where if you do go with Moore ultimately, and he does still have a shorter start, what he's kind of done consistently this year with regards to pitch counts, you do have options to kind of close out the back end for you. And you probably don't have to burn both of those guys, Manka and Abraham. But yeah, to me, Moore and Beard are sort of interchangeable. Like, I don't think one is dramatically better than the other. I think it's more about matchups. Who do you think is going to have it that day? Who do you think matches up better? Also, who do you feel more comfortable maybe being your game 3 guy, when you get there? And I think, Beard is a guy who they love. They wanted immensely when this season began. He's had his up and downs. I think he has 11 home runs, as Brett mentioned. Actually, something I asked Link about a couple weeks ago when he pitched. That to me is the only red flag with Beard, is the home run concern. So which team do you think that would be a bigger concern with? Might play into the idea of, do you pitch him forward or backwards as far as 1 or 3 on the weekend? But Wes is your guy if you get to Saturday, especially in the winner's bracket.
I think we're all on the same page, right? You're going to save your ace to best position yourself to win the regional. And I actually expect Coastal Carolina to probably do the same exact thing with Cam Flukie, right? Who has been phenomenal for them for 2 years, battling injury and a fastball that reaches into the upper 90s. They're going to try and, Schnall said that, Kevin Schnall, the head coach for the Chanticleers, earlier this week, said we're going in there to win a regional, not necessarily one game. And so I think he was tipping his hand a little bit as to positioning his pitching staff to try and win the regional. And Nee, you said it best. You've got to win your first 2 games. That is the key to winning regionals. I think when you're the home team, especially when you go up 2-0, the chances of not coming out of your regional are very low. Now there are times where the home team battles back and is able to win in a winner-take-all game 7. But that doesn't typically happen for a road team, right? They don't usually get behind the 8 ball, then find a way. So I do think if you're Florida State, it's a race to 2-0, and then you have terrific pitching options the rest of the weekend, playing against teams that should be pretty depleted on the mounds. And you're talking about that game 3 on a Sunday. If you're coming through the loser's bracket, you're playing a doubleheader on Sunday. So that's the second game of the day in the evening against a host site, and that becomes very difficult. I'm pretty sure weather is going to be an issue this weekend in Tallahassee. They're already prepping for that. It wouldn't be a regional in Tallahassee if the weather didn't at least one time cause chaos, and I do believe that that's going to be really interesting how everyone navigates that. And we'll talk more about why Florida State wants to play that early game on Friday. But to put a pin in on this, Trey Beard, Bryson Moore, Wes Mendez. Love the way Trey Beard has been pitching recently. It seems like the slider has been in play for him. But Bryson Moore, the ability to attack with the fastball, I personally love. I think he's been your second best pitcher really for the back half of the regular season. And I think the Noles have been looking for a way to incorporate him as the number 2. within the limits of making sure he's healthy with his arm and, the progression there. So I actually even believe if the Noles make it out of this regional, you would see Bryson Moore probably go second in a super regional behind Mendez the following week. Like I do genuinely believe he's your number 2. I'd go with Bryson there. And again, I think, Brett, you mentioned it earlier, pitching to contact, being comfortable doing that, allowing your defense go to work. And then, Nee, you said it too, it allows you not to use as much of your bullpen, right? If you can get a guy, give you consistently a 6-7 inning start, you save some of your better arms for the next day and the following, if things go to script, right? If things stay according to schedule, and, like I foresee, maybe your starter goes 6-7 innings and it's like the Miami game where it was only 1-0 in the 7th. Now, all of a sudden you're thinking, oh boy, I might have to bring Kinnear or Abraham in to shut down game 1 and move me to game 2. But you hope the offense is enough in game 1 there. But I think all three of us believe it won't be Mendez. And whether it's, Beard or Moore, that'll be interesting. But I think we've all laid out who we feel would give the Noles the best shot in a game 1. What do we think of playing the early game? 3:00. Nee, I think it's interesting, right? That's something FSU has chosen to do each of the last couple of years. I'll give you the floor here as to why you believe that's the best and most optimal for trying to win a ball game and win a regional.
Well, it's a Link Jarrett tradition. I mean, it's what he does. But the number one reason is because of weather. Whether you're starting at 3 or you're getting delayed, you're not playing into the middle of the night, putting yourself into a situation where you play late, play early. You're trying to get your game done. You're trying to get your guys into their beds on time. You're trying to get ready for the next day. And you do that by playing early. And Tallahassee has a tradition of regionals being interrupted by weather. It's just a natural order of things this time of year with Tallahassee, with how weather is. So I'm good with it. I think they're one of 9 teams that are hosting that are playing the early game on Friday nationally. So it's not like they're on an island by themselves by any stretch.
Yeah, 9. You're right. I can give you the other schools quickly. Auburn, UCLA, Georgia Tech, Texas, Florida, Southern Miss, Kansas, Mississippi State, all joining Florida State in playing that early game. And Brett, you talk about potential extra rest, right? Say if you needed to use Abraham or Kinnear on Friday for an inning, you feel a lot better about the amount of rest between the early game and playing in the winner's bracket or loser's bracket with your season on the line. Bring in some of your bullpen arms back out there on a shorter rest.
Yeah, every second counts, especially for a team that's dealt with as many injuries as they've dealt with this year. So I think every second they can have right now is important to them, but I do get why it upsets people. I'll say that.
To be, I think, sympathetic to fans who know that they're going to be working at 3:00 on Friday, that's a bummer, right? You want to buy tickets, you spend money, you want to come support your team. And yes, the energy at night at Hauser is different than the energy at 3:00 on a Friday, but
I will say 3:00 later than it's been the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's usually been, I think, 1.
ESPN has gotten involved and said, all right, so your preference is early. This is the earliest we can do for you. And, we'll see if there's weather involved for that night game. They could be playing into the early morning hours of the Tallahassee evening into Saturday. So I don't mind it at all, but I am sympathetic to fans. I will say the last 2 years, the first game has been pretty electric fan-wise for Florida State, right? The atmosphere against Stetson a few years ago and Bethune last year was excellent, I thought. And I do also think, if you lose that first game, less fans are coming on Saturday in that loser's bracket game anyway. So you want to make sure your team is in its best possible position. And I also think the caveat of St. John's having to play in this weather at 3:00 could be interesting. A team from New York having to come down and play in this Tallahassee heat in the daytime could make a difference as well. So all things involved, it has to do with, like Nee said, the weather, making sure that you're affected less by it. And then rest for your players, rest for your arms. Again, it gives you a chance, I think, to best position yourself to win those first 2 games and to go 2-0. Brett, what do we know about St. John's? What do we need to get prepared on, and the fans of our podcast listeners, about the Red Storm, who are the champions of the Big East?
Yeah, number one thing you need to know is that they have a really good starter in Liam O'Leary. He's been really good for them all year, and he's been good against some good competition too. They faced Arizona State and Kentucky early in the year. Arizona State has one of the best offenses in the country, 5 2/3, 4 earned runs against them. Against Kentucky, who snuck into the field, 6 innings and 2 earned runs. So that was a while ago, but since then, I mean, he's been an absolute innings eater for St. John's. Just looking since April 2nd, he has 3 9-inning complete games. And they're not afraid to throw him a lot of pitches. He has I think he's got 7 games this year where he's throwing 7 innings or more. Last week, he threw 137 pitches. That was on the 21st. What day was that? Was that Thursday, I think?
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah. So he threw 137 pitches last Thursday in 8 innings against Creighton. Big, lanky right-hander, 6'4", 175 pounds. He's a JUCO transfer. On the year, in 100 innings, he has a 2.97 ERA. I think he's only given up 5 home runs so far this year. Doesn't strike out a ton of guys, which is good news for FSU. 68 strikeouts, but also does not walk many hitters, only 24 walks. So I think that's the big thing that stands out with St. John's when you're looking at them. And obviously FSU getting them in game 1, you expect to see him. They also have a very good catcher in Adam Agresti, who leads them in WAR this year.
Yeah, I know, Larry, one thing I'll add, 11 innings more thrown on the season in Wes, just to give you a comparison of FSU's A's versus his usage.
I have some of his advanced stats pulled up, and he's gone 100 pitches 9 times or more. At least 9 times this year. And you mentioned 137 pitches. He went 130 back on April 2nd as well, and 123 against UConn in a complete game shutout. So they will leave him out there. They're not looking to use their bullpen when Mr. O'Leary is on the mound. And, Brett, you and I were conversing a little bit before we hit the record button. And Nee, you've covered this team all year. Sometimes those guys that stay in the zone don't strike out a ton of guys. They end up giving Florida State some fits, right? An FSU team that is aggressive and will swing early. And if he can get some weak contact and get some 8, 9, 10 pitch innings to kind of get through a couple, you could see him in the 7th inning. If he's able to throw 137 pitches, I mean, he is nowhere near close to coming out in the 7th inning. So I will be interested to see how Florida State does. I was looking at some of his pitch mix, and he is a 4-pitch mix guy. Does love the slider against right-handed hitters, and we'll go to that almost majority of the time. And against lefties, it's more fastball mixed in with a little bit of a curveball. It's not a ton of changeups, but he is a fastball, slider, curveball guy for the most part, and will mix in a change. Hasn't given up a ton of home runs on the year, so he keeps it in the park. This is the type of game for me. If you're Florida State's offense, boys, you do need to find a big inning off of O'Leary, right? I don't think you can solo shot in the 2nd, solo homer in the 4th, leave 13 guys on base. I expect guys to get on base. There will be some traffic, I think, against O'Leary. Can you capitalize in your home park? Can we see a Brody DeLamielleure backside home run over the screen? A Stutzer off the scoreboard. Shmela should be ready to go this weekend. We'll see. You need some power, right? Can Benny Barrett tap into more of that? And can you put up a 4 or 5 spot? Because in games like this, and it seems like against O'Leary, whose fastball fits anywhere from 89 to 92, you're going to need a crooked number to kind of set the momentum and set the tempo of the game so that you can get Hauser involved and get a 4 seed playing on its back heels a little bit. If I see a scenario in which if I look up on Friday and we're in the 7th inning of a 3-2 type ball game, one way or another, and Bryson's pitched well, but O'Leary's sitting in there with, 90 pitches in the 7th, and he can continue to go out there, that's when a team like St. John's will be playing with some confidence and some serious belief in being able to get this game. So I'd like to see Florida State put a crooked number up early. And the reason I'm bringing this up, Brett, the Noles haven't put up a ton of crooked numbers since Miles Bailey went down with injury. But if they've been able to do it, the positive is they have been able to do it at Hauser from time to time in their home ballpark.
Yeah, offense has been way better at home. I'm really interested to see what the approach is against O'Leary with how many breaking balls he throws, and I'm guessing that usage percentage is only going to go up against FSU's lineup. But we know that FSU's lineup is prone, at least certain hitters are prone to swing at breaking balls outside the zone, especially early in counts, and get themselves out with weak contact. So, but at the same time, with the 89-92 fastball, you're probably going to be trying to jump on that and not let him get to the breaking balls. But I think if O'Leary's able to land the breaking balls early in counts, then they're going to be forced to swing at them. So it'll just be interesting to see how the two coaching staffs kind of approach that. But yeah, O'Leary's going to be out there as long as he can be out there. I'm sure we're going to see him for 120 plus pitches probably. I mean, don't be surprised if he goes to 140. I mean, the fact that he threw 130 some pitches last week, like they're willing to push the limit with his arm this year with the team they have. So yeah, but FSU's offense has been a lot better at home this year. I feel like just overall whole team, but St. John's offensively 789 OPS, 279 average as a team. Best hitter on the team, McGresty, 1043 OPS. A couple other guys on the team, Sean McMillan, 903 OPS. Jaden Rafe Stanger has a 328 average, leads the team. So a few guys there that can do some things offensively for them. But I think the biggest thing is just how is O'Leary going to handle FSU's offense?
Yeah, on O'Leary, he's only allowed 24 walks in 100 innings, kind of speaks to he just allows you to try to hit him. Of his 88 hits allowed, 66 are singles. Opponents hit 236 against him. I feel it's going to be interesting. St. John's Field's at a 977 clip on the season. I'm interested to see how they handle things on Friday with regards to FSU trying to put it in play. We've seen FSU take advantage of teams that don't field effectively, and I think this is an example of it. Will be interesting to see, not to go with a stereotype, but Northeastern teams tend to struggle a bit in the fielding situation. I'm interested to see if that carries over. I think with O'Leary, the thing is you got to swing the contact, but it's got to be good contact. You want to hit gap balls, you want to hit doubles, live with the doubles. Kid's only given up 5 home runs in 100 innings. I don't think he's going to give up a bunch of moonshots. You never know, but I don't think that's what it's going to be about. To me, it's more about put guys on the bases, make him uncomfortable, make him throw pitches, make him work for every out he gets. Don't just play ground out baseball or fly out baseball.
Yeah, I was just go ahead, Brett. One thing I was going to add on St. John's was they do have a couple guys that can really run. John LeGrand, 24 stolen bases, although he has been thrown out 10 times. They have 2 other guys with 10 plus stolen bases, 85 as a team. On the flip side, though, they have allowed 81 stolen bases and 105 attempts. So I think teams can run on them a little bit.
Yeah, and Florida State has not controlled the base paths well this season. So we'll see how that plays out. I've got some other notes on O'Leary. Last 2 starts against Butler and Creighton, first pitch strike percentage. So the amount of times he throws a first pitch strike, 43.5% and 46.9%. So he is up there looking to try and get some swing and miss with the breaking balls early in counts and off speeds. I think you'll see a lot of pitching backwards from him. And if he's going to be in the game, boys, for 7-8 innings, how many times through the order do you think that is for Florida State?
3 to 4.
Yeah, at least 4, right? If he's at 120 pitches. So my question and maybe not a question, curiosity, what does the approach become after you see him the first time? And then how does he try to mix the 3 to 4 pitches that he has second time through the order, third time through the order, and then fourth time through the order? And I have numbers on his stats, second time, third time, fourth time. I won't get into the weeds on it. And I think FSU's coaching staff would call me if I give away all these secrets on the podcast. But I am curious for storylines. What does Florida State do offensively? the last few weeks, macro, and want to get both of your thoughts on this. Pitt was the latest example, but we've seen it before, right? Clemson, Miami. The Noles, from an at-bat to at-bat standpoint, are doing a better job of getting on base, but they've left a ton of guys on the base paths. And when you look at some of the key moments they've been in, obviously the magnifying glass and the spotlight shines brighter in the postseason, right? Because every moment now matters just a little bit more. What do you guys think of the offense right now as we're moving into postseason baseball in the regionals? And how important do you think it's going to be to have some timely hitting when you have runners in scoring position, especially, like I said, this time of year in a regional and hopefully a super regional?
Well, I mean, the chips left on the table is it's the most painful thing about this team, in my opinion. It's brutal sometimes when you look, and that left on base count 7 innings in is double digits. I mean, that's bad baseball. It drives Link Jarrett nuts. It certainly drives fans nuts. It drives me nuts and in the box. As far as timely hitting, I think it's understanding the person you're sending to the plate and what they're capable of and what they've done. Stop hoping and just know what the numbers tell you. This is what this guy has done. This is what he is. You know, if it's a guy who's gotten out in a lot of those situations, do what it takes to move people over. Just play smart baseball. Scratch one across. Don't hit in the GDPs. Get into innings where you can have guys on the base paths. Keep passing the bat. You know, make the most of the 3 outs you get. Too often it feels like they get in a 1-out situation with bases loaded or a no-out situation with 2 runners in scoring position, and they end the inning with a 0 on the board. And you can't do that. You don't get away with that in the postseason. Giving away free outs in the postseason and not cashing in the chips when they're in position for you to cash in is how you get eliminated. And you just can't be that.
And because of that, I wonder how much Link turns to small ball over these hopefully next couple of weeks. But I feel like this is the time of year where we start to see Link use small ball more to make sure that, because I feel like he uses the whole regular season to give guys opportunities for the most part to try to make something happen in those at-bats. But like Chris said, I think the biggest thing at this point, even like not even the timely hitting, but just making like productive outs when you need to make productive outs and putting the ball in play when you need to. But yeah, it feels like outside of Ben Barrett's grand slam, they just cannot do anything when they get bases loaded specifically. And it seems like they always seem to get bases loaded with 2 outs, and that ends up bloating the left on base numbers. But yeah, I think you're hoping that at some point the dam breaks and you get a lot of those at the right time, because 2-out RBI is basically what I think that's what wins championships at the end of the day.
Very true. And I think getting Shmela back, like I mentioned, will be very important for Florida State, right? And I think, especially at home, he's had the propensity to run a baseball out in a key moment for you and have those clutch hits. And I think he had the extra base. Did he have a triple, I think, against Notre Dame that cleared the bases earlier this year? So he's been someone to look forward to. And, I think, move Chase back in the lineup against Pitt, and it was by necessity, I think. And then I also think they were trying to figure out, all right, well, what can he do right now for you after the time away? And, I like Chase. I'm not sure that the way the team was playing, that it's the right time to put him back in the lineup as we get to postseason. If all your other parts are healthy, I like the outfield the way it is of Stutzer, Dowd, Delamalier, and Shmela at DH, flip-flopping with Carnes. But this is the time of year, too. I think you need a guy like Carnes to really get hot. You and I have talked, Brett, all year about when Carnes is on a heater, he has opportunities and the propensity to really carry you offensively for a weekend. Now would be a great time. Brody has shown you some consistency in the back half of the year. I think Dowd is still one of your more consistent at-bats, and getting him at his best version of himself would be important. And then a guy like John Stutzer, who at this point now, the amount of at-bats he's gotten, the amount of reps he's gotten, he's no longer a freshman. And you'd like to see some of that upside kind of come to play, right? And be able to come to fruition in a postseason environment like this. So I think offensively, you're going to need the Noles to be able to do some damage, especially when we know that the way they pitch, they're going to be in every game. Like, how many times have you guys looked up this year and Florida State's been getting blown out? It doesn't seem like almost all of their losses are pretty excruciating because they come down to something late game, right? Like they're going to be in these ball games, whether it's in your regional or a super regional. Your pitching gives you a chance to keep it close. The question is, can your offense do enough to be on the right side of that close win instead of a close loss? And those margins in the postseason are razor thin one way or another. And you don't have the offense that Georgia Tech does or Georgia does, where you can bludgeon people to death and really rely on that. You do need to play within those margins and come out on the right side of that. And that means what we just talked about, coming through with 2 outs, runners in scoring position, clean defense, good base running, and really taking advantage of all the opportunities that you have.
From a lineup standpoint, one thing I'm interested in is, does he slide somebody down who he views as more reliable to split up what it's been in the back half of the order? Because there's a degree of that group has struggled, and a lot of times when it gets there, it's 1, 2, 3 outs. Not always, but more often than not. And I understand if you slide somebody down, the ability for them to get more at bats gets limited. That's why guys bat earlier if they're better batters. But do you do something at either putting somebody at 9 or splitting up 7, 8, 9 in some form or fashion with someone who you view as more reliable? And Nate, for example, comes to mind for me. I think Nate's a guy after Braden Dowd who I feel like puts together some of the best at bats for this baseball team. Do you put him, if you're playing him and Carnes together, is Carnes earlier in the lineup and Nate a little bit later to provide that? Or do you continue to do where those two usually bat in very close proximity to one another, one after the other, or separated by one? It's one of those things is, Link thinks about everything a lot, probably too much, honestly, if you asked him. I'm interested if he's thought about trying to do that to break up some of the monotony of out-getters that they've had at times.
Yeah, and the way Ben's been swinging it probably gives them the ability to do that if they wanted to, and leave Ben at 5 and move Nate back in the bottom third. Because I do personally think I would have Nate behind the plate and Carnes DHing and Stetzer be the third outfielder with Brody and Dowd, and then have Chase come off the bench as a pinch runner, which is everybody's favorite experience. But you hope it works at the right time and that you've learned from the mistakes at this point, and now you can use the speed to be your strength, because it can be an incredible weapon off the bench to be able to bring that off and use that at any time from the 7th to 9th at this point of the season in a tied or 1-run game. And to your point, Ariya, I was looking through the schedule. I think the only games this year that have really gotten away from them have been the third one in Arlington, Sunday game the day after Miles got hurt, and the last Georgia Tech game. Other than that, all their losses this year have really been games that they've been in and that you say a couple of plays go different here or there, they could have won. So, yeah, I think they're going to be in every single ball game. It's just about not making errors and not walking guys, not putting guys on base, not giving out free passes throughout the weekend. And I think if you can avoid that and avoid the strikeouts offensively ramping up, that you can come out of this weekend successfully.
To your point about that Georgia Tech game, what was crazy was Florida State went into the top of the 6th, leading 3-2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happened very quickly in 2 innings. Bottom 6, bottom 7th, and you looked up and went, "Wow, that happened." What's
it was really the only
air conditioning on the bus is what happened there.
Chris, it's the movie Anchorman, right? Boy, that escalated quickly. Yeah. When Ron Burgundy. I was on the call for that game. That was one of the games I was on a broadcast for, and I just remember what just happened. Danny Hall texted me, and he was like, "You had enough yet?" And I said, "Matter of fact, yes, I have had enough. And if you guys wrap this up quick enough, I can go make the Braves game that starts at 7:15 here in Atlanta. So let's work on this if we want to not drag this thing out." But to jokes aside, this team will be in ball games, right? We know that. They pitch at a very high level. It's one of the best overall pitching staffs, I think, in the regionals. And they have been pitching at a pretty high level. And the team's going to fight. That's a Link Jarrett staple. This group will go tooth and nail for 27 outs, especially at Hauser in front of their home fans. So I expect that fight to be there and the energy to be pretty high. One thing I didn't mention about the Pitt game, Brett, when you and I recapped that, did you notice the energy after Barrett's grand slam? I mean, it was the shots of the dugout. And Chris, you watched. I mean, it was a very electric dugout and you had that feel of a team that's, I think, really turning the page in terms of energy-wise this time of year, because I do feel like Florida State wanted that game pretty badly. All those kids seem to be really into it throughout that ball game.
To that point, I felt like during the Miami series, it felt more like Clubhouser than it had for pretty much since Miles got hurt, for sure. And truthfully, most of the season, even early in the season, they were trying to figure a lot of things out, and they didn't have that looseness. There were moments during the Miami series where I thought they felt very loose, and it's a minor thing, but in the postseason when the margins are tight, it's a good thing to have. And yeah, I think this group, like, I trust this group to go play hard and go make their best effort, but they can't be their own worst enemy. When they're their own worst enemy, the margins are slim for them, and that's what injures them, puts them in a bad position to win games.
Yeah. All right, Brett, let's talk a little bit about Coastal Carolina as the 2 seed in this regional. I have a lot of respect for that program. How can you not? They have been relevant for a while now in college baseball. They are a mid-major by only name, in my opinion, by only the conference they play in, which, by the way, the Sun Belt is excellent baseball. I urge any average college baseball fan who's listening to our podcast, watch more Sun Belt. It is a lot of fun. The fans really care. I think Coastal's obviously one of them. Southern Miss has been a powerhouse for a while and is hosting. And I could go on and on about the 7 or 8 schools that really invest in baseball, and their fans really care, right? They're tight-knit communities, usually in some small towns in the Southeast, that really bond with that school and that baseball program. And I love watching it, popping it up on a Friday night. Doesn't get much better than that. I've done Sun Belt tournaments in the past. Electric, right? That conference really cares. They're not a mid-major by success. They win a lot of games. They have humbled a lot of teams. I go back to Auburn, who lost to them in a super regional. I go back to LSU, who was humbled by them in a super regional. Was it last year against LSU in the national title? I thought Fluky looked fantastic against the Tigers in this version of it, of the Tigers and the Ashants. Really love their program. Now, this group has not played at the same level as some of the Coastal Carolina teams of the past. They're kind of coming in, playing not their best ball down the stretch, but I do think they're hoping that the return of Cam Fluky to full strength, or close to full strength, elevates their ceiling a little bit, and they'll be a confident bunch coming into Tallahassee this weekend, because not just what the group they have right now, but a lot of those kids are winners, and they've won at a very high level, and playing in this atmosphere won't intimidate them, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think Coastal usually schedules pretty tough throughout the year too, and they play some ACC teams throughout the year in the midweeks. I think they played Clemson and North Carolina, and maybe also North Carolina State this year. So they're used to playing high level, and last year obviously they almost won it all, and that pitching staff was unbelievably good. They haven't been quite as good on the mound this year with a 5.08 ERA, and they had a couple of really big injuries in the rotation, with one of those happening to Fluky. And he came back about 4 weeks ago now, I think. Fluky has made 6 starts on the year. I think the first one was the one he got hurt in, and I want to say he's made 5 starts.
Yeah, he's on 4 innings or less in those starts, so they've definitely kind of slowly ramped him up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, they've capped him at, I think, 68 pitches, I want to say. I think he had last week. So I don't expect him to just all of a sudden let it loose and let it rip with him. I would guess he's probably capped at about 5 innings or 75 pitches, and maybe even capped at 4. He's just such a valuable arm. Like, he's going to be a top 15 pick probably, and then will be drafted despite really not pitching this year. He's a 6'6" righty that has absolutely premium stuff. He hasn't performed quite to the level that you would expect of him with a 4.35 ERA, but he does have 28 Ks to 7 walks. My big thing with Coastal Carolina is you cannot get behind against them. They have a couple of really good relievers. Like, weirdly, they've had like no good starters this year, but they have a couple of really good bullpen arms. And Darren Horn is the first one, 29 appearances, 65 1/3 as a 3.17 ERA. 90 strikeouts in those 65 1/3, has 7 saves. And then offensively, the thing with them offensively is they run a lot. Another thing I noticed while looking at their stat sheet is they like to take hit by pitches. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys with 10 or more hit by pitches, 135 hit by pitches on the year. So a gritty bunch that's looking to get on base and then run when they get on base. And we know sometimes that can be a little chaotic for FSU.
Yeah, they're number 27 in the RPI, and they earn that ranking. I think it speaks to the volume or the level of what they are as a 2 seed. They're 9-9 against quad 1. Speaks to them playing high level competition. You know, you mentioned Darren Horn. He's got 65 innings, 7 saves, 8-1. He's been excellent for them. I do think Fluky's the biggest wild card of this whole weekend for any team. Offensively, Rex Watson in right field's pretty good. 12 home runs, 16 doubles, 64 RBIs. Third baseman Walker Mitchell is another guy, leads the team with a 314 batting average. He's got 16 doubles, much more doubles guy than a power guy necessarily, but 54 RBIs as well. The one interesting thing to me with Coastal is Kevin Schnall being a South Carolina candidate. He seemed like, just keeping up with some of the interviews and stuff with him leading up to now, and really since the season ended for South Carolina, he's done a really good job navigating all of that. I think he said, you know, essentially my agent and them have had contact and basically exchanged information, but he said he had not specifically spoke with them. It's just always interesting because that's one of those things that, you know, it ramps and it ramps and it ramps, and he's certainly a leading candidate, and sometimes it can become an issue. But I think Schnall, being a veteran coach, a guy who's coached at a high level at a school that plays high level baseball, he's done a good job with all of that. But yeah, Coastal is fully capable of coming in Tallahassee and winning the regional. They are a good enough team despite sort of being a flawed bunch themselves this year.
And to Chris's point about Schnall, they did limp to the finish line this year. I think they lost the last 2 series of conference play, and then they went 1-2 in the conference tournament. And Southern Miss kind of stole the regular season title from them, and then also won the tournament. So they did kind of limp to the finish line. I think they're like 8-12 in the last 20 games, I want to say, or something like that. But because they looked like they were going to be a host for a while there, but kind of fell off a little bit over these last 3 weeks.
Yeah, my notes on Coastal Carolina are that exactly too, Brett. They were in the hosting conversation probably beginning of May and just didn't finish the job to really be there and open the door for some other teams. But, man, they've got wins this year against teams like Ole Miss. Campbell, I think very highly of Campbell, and they beat them. They've got wins over Wake Forest, over Clemson. They've got wins over North Carolina, at North Carolina. They won that game 12-2. So I think they're overall 4-3 against the ACC this year, and they've got a win over the SEC and in Ole Miss, as I mentioned. So they're going to be ready to play, and that's part of what we started with. It's a bunch of kids who it's just a mid-major in terms of the conference they play, not in terms of production, expectation. It's Coastal Carolina. They average 5,000 fans a game at their games. Like it's a really good atmosphere in the state of South Carolina. And, you know, guys like, you know, Mitchell and Barthol and Mijos, you know, those guys, you know, the guys like Thorndike, they've all been through a postseason run that has gone all the way to Omaha, right? And not just to Omaha, to the championship series. Like they've played in much bigger games than what they're going to be playing in at Hauser. And so it's a group that maybe for whatever reason, injuries, Hayden Johnson was the arm you were mentioning, Brett, that went down, who was having an electric year before he went down. And maybe it's the injuries, maybe it's some new guys, but the chemistry hasn't maybe quite been there all the way through to be able to have a consistent season. But that doesn't mean that a new slate, a clean slate, won't allow them to have the opportunity with maybe a better version of Fluky and rested version of Fluky who's ready to now kind of get into the flow of postseason. So they check a lot of boxes, man. That's a tough number 2 seed. I think overall FSU got a pretty favorable draw, but I would say that the matchup with Coastal was difficult. I would have preferred to have UCF in the regional than Coastal Carolina, just personally. But
yeah,
yeah,
if Coastal can get through that first game without using Fluky and Horn, you're in some trouble. You're going to be in a
you're going
dogfight.
to need Mendez and Abraham or Kinnear to be right there, tooth and nail, and how's it really make the difference right after 6-7 innings, which it can.
I think Schnall said in the interview when they learned their tournament fate that 30% of their innings this year are freshmen. Somewhere in that ballpark, it's right around like a third of their innings are freshmen as far as pitching. And then the other thing with them, speaking to the schedule, they've played 28 games away from home this year. Some of those are true road games, some are neutral. I think 6 of them are neutral. They're 17-11 in those games, so they're a tested bunch. Like Hauser's an intimidating place, and it will be a raucous atmosphere, especially if that's who FSU is playing in the second game. But they are somewhat built to handle such a thing. I don't think it's going to be overwhelming for Coastal.
I agree.
I had 2 more points on Coastal. Jordan Taylor, who was a freshman at FSU in 2023, will be in his second straight Tallahassee regional. He was at Stetson last year and had a good year for Stetson last year, and was starting to begin the year for Coastal. But I think he's kind of in the DH mix at this point. But he is one of those guys that can really run for them if he is in the lineup. If he's not in the lineup, I would expect to see him as a potential pinch runner. And then the other thing is they're really, really good up the middle defensively. I think both their shortstop and second baseman are like a couple of the top guys at their position when it comes to the metrics this year, like defensive runs saved. Both of those guys have been, I think the shortstop I was reading on D1 has like 9.8 defensive runs saved, and the second baseman has like 11 point something, which is like the most in the country. So really good defensive team.
Yeah, I'm looking at that now too. Yeah, they are really good. Some of the other pitchers that they'll use, right, when we look at other options, Luke Jones is that one, 4.62 ERA on the year. He might go game 1 against Northern Illinois. Here's the risk. If you don't win that first game, if you're Coastal, you've really put yourself in a tough spot. But I also think, if your best chance of winning the regional is to go 2-0, you probably need to find a way to beat Northern Illinois without Fluky and Horn, and hope you have them both available and fresh against Florida State. So Jones's stuff on the year, as I look at him, 76 innings, 4-2 record, 4.62 ERA, 28 walks in 76 innings, 63 strikeouts, batters hitting just 245 off of him, 16 hit by pitches. That's a starter. And then Ross Norman has also got 15 starts on the year. And then Jackson Smolitz has 10 starts on the year. If you're looking at potential over the course of the weekend, what the names you might see are. So Coastal team who, again, I think is going to come in ready to play. And I think that'll be a primetime national TV matchup Saturday night if you get the Noles and the Shants.
Yeah, I think it'll be one of the biggest games probably in the country, and that I can't think of many other 1s versus 2 that are as good as that one, probably, just when it comes to branding. I'm guessing there's some SEC ACC matchups, but not many that can come to mind that are better than FSU Coastal if it happens.
Yeah. What do we know about Northern Illinois other than all I can think of in Northern Illinois is 2012 Orange Bowl in football? That's the only thing I can remember them as, and how, what was it? Florida State was going to be on their knees by the end of the game.
Yeah, Jordan Lynch, right? Wasn't it Jordan Lynch? I think my mind's serving me right there. Yeah. NIU, they haven't been in a tournament forever. Their head coach, Ryan Copeland's only been there a couple years. They've had a drastic improvement this season under him. RPI is underwhelming. Strength of schedule is kind of underwhelming, but they did their business and they handled their conference both in the regular season and in the tournament. That's why they're here. Brett, I know, is going to touch on the players. The guys, when I was looking at them, that stood out to me as left fielder Caden Robertson has 14 home runs, 58 RBIs. Second baseman Cole Smith, 17 doubles, 6 home runs, so a little bit of juice, 47 RBIs. First baseman Gavin Baldwin, 12 doubles, 15 home runs, 57 RBIs. Yeah. The one who hits the best of that bunch is Cole Smith. their pitching didn't particularly stand out to me when I was just looking at the numbers. Maybe Brett studied it a bit more and something stood out. I believe Max Vazvila is their main guy. He is 8-0 on the season, 83 innings pitched, has a 3.04 ERA. All you, Brett.
Yeah, I was really surprised when Northern Illinois popped up as the 3 seed. And I ran to RPI to see where they were in it. And I think there's only, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 other 3 seeds that are below them in RPI. And really most of the other ones are very, very high above them in RPI. And there's even some 4 seeds that are right around them. I think Lamar is a 4 seed, I want to say, and they're right at 90. And Northern Illinois' strength of schedule this year was 218 in the country. So, but yeah, looking at them, Vila, however you say that, he's another guy that eats innings at a high level, 3 complete games as well, just like the St. John's starters. Only walked 19 guys this year. I was looking at him earlier in the week. I think he's a lefty, like a shorter lefty. But to Chris's point about his record, I think they're like 14-1 in the games he's pitched in this year. Yeah, he's a 5'10", 185-pound lefty. And yeah, he's pitched in 15 games this year, started 14. They've only lost 1 of those games. And that actually looks like the game where he made a relief appearance in midweek. So they've won every single game he started, 14-0. So if you're Coastal and you're looking at Northern Illinois, that's probably the thing where you're a little concerned, and you might have to think about, running out some of your better arms against them. I mean, and I think Northern Illinois has some offensive capability too. I think Cole Smith, might have the best numbers of anybody in the regional offensively, with 17 doubles, 3 triples, 6 homers. He has a 583 slug. He's only struck out 2 more times than he's walked this year. 364 average to go with that. They also have some running capability. Marcus Romero, 23 stolen bases. Charlie Parcell, not Purcell, 17 stolen bases. So, and all the teams in this regional actually field at a really high level. They're all like 977 or better. And NIU, I think, is the best at 979. Only made 39 errors all year. Don't know what their situation looks like on their field. Maybe it's all turf, and maybe it's different coming down to FSU, but I think you have to respect that nonetheless, just for only making 39 errors over how many games is that? 52 games?
52.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing Cole Smith play. I've kind of kept up through the social medias of, some of the mid-majors, and, he's been a standout, and him and Baldwin, I think will give Northern Illinois some punch, right, and some ability. So I am looking forward to seeing that Coastal and Northern Illinois game. I love watching, the second game at Hauser when, Florida State's not involved. You go grab a hot dog and a drink and just sit out there, and typically there's enough room in the grandstands to kind of stretch out and watch some baseball at Hauser. I'm weird like that. I enjoy seeing like a home run over the screen that doesn't involve Florida State. Like, I wish the Noles would host more, non-conference tournaments and things like that at Hauser. And I'll be looking forward to that. I respect Northern Illinois a lot. There have been a couple of mid-major darlings this year, namely Miami of Ohio and Kent State. And Northern Illinois performed very well against those teams. So those were 2 teams I thought were fighting for at-larges, especially Kent State, who I thought would be able to get close. And so, maybe some people are sleeping on Northern Illinois. I think a lot of people just think Coastal's going to run through Northern Illinois, and I'm not sure that's the case, especially if Fluky doesn't go in game 1. That might be an interesting battle. Similar to, like, last year, you guys remember, was a little bit weird, right? Northeastern was the 3 seed. They were the 2 seed in Tallahassee, and they really didn't have a shot in their game that they played against Mississippi State. They were kind of overwhelmed by the stuff. I'm not sure Northern Illinois will just be overwhelmed by Coastal, in my opinion. So
I think that perception has to do with the fact that Coastal has hoisted the most important trophy. Well, NIU hasn't been in a tournament in 54 years.
And that's fair. And I think, again, that's
I think
that off with Coastal's not a mid-major in our eyes. That's a program on the baseball diamond that, you have to respect as a powerhouse, right? And so I'm curious, though. I've watched this version of Coastal. Like, I watched some of the Sun Belt tournament. They weren't awful. They lost 2 one-run games to the Cajuns, who Louisiana had their number this year. I think they won 4 out of the 5 games against Coastal, and I think 3 of them were by 1 run. So that'll be interesting to see, what version of Coastal we get, what version of Fluky will we get. And then St. John's, I feel like we're kind of glossing over them just a little bit. They haven't been a powerhouse in a while, but it's not like they're not used to making regionals. Like, they've been to 30 of them, I think. Historically, they've been to Omaha a few times. Like, the St. John's programs of the 90s and early 2000s were pretty respectable. And I think they won a regional back in 2012, if I remember correctly. That's not name brand wise a program that hasn't mattered, right? St. John's has had some pretty nice teams in years past. Nee, you've covered college baseball a while. I mean, St. John's had some respect there for a while.
Yeah, I think the thing is, this day and age, because of the portal, when teams like that have effective players, they're usually recruited away. I think that's part of the reason what we used to believe 10, 15 years ago of some of the lesser market teams, it's sort of going away. But all it is you got to get hot for 2 weekends. That's all the postseason is. To get to Omaha, it's about being good for 2 weekends. Winning the first game usually matters. Percentage-wise, it is a dramatically higher percentage. But yeah, I mean, St. John's, I look at this regional, I think it's FSU and Coastal, and that's who it's going to come down to. But you never know with those first day games. Bucknell came in here many moons ago and won that first game, made it an interesting weekend. There's other teams that have come through the lesser portion of the bracket and done it. On paper, though, I think there's a healthy gap between 1 and 2 and then 3 and then 3 and then 4, personally.
If you guys had to guess, where does Miles Bailey rank among all players in this regional in WAR for the season?
Second.
Rank?
Yeah, among all the players in this regional.
I just said first.
He's 6th, but that's insane.
Really?
He hasn't played in so long. He played what, 28 games, and he racked up a 2.48 WAR, which is 3rd on FSU and would be 1st on Northern Illinois.
Would it be 2nd on
Coastal? I think it'd be 2nd on Coastal and on St. John's.
Yeah. It's crazy.
All right, let's quickly 5 minutes on. I think we're pretty set on the Tallahassee regional. Feel pretty good about everything we've talked about all the way through. We went through the lineup, who we would start in game 1, preview of the 4 teams, what it will take to win it if you're Florida State. I'm going to do this. Boys, you guys are neutral media members. I'm going to do this. Fans, we need you at Hauser. We need you loud. We need you buying tickets. We need the atmosphere to be what Club Hauser can be. And it's pretty special time of year. It's my favorite time of year for Dick Hauser Stadium is postseason baseball. And there is a shot, if we win this regional, that Oklahoma State can take Tuscaloosa regional. And maybe we'll have a super regional back at Hauser in a second weekend in the postseason. But need those tickets sold, need it loud. 3 o'clock is close to the end of the workday. Can you shave off, I don't know, a couple hours? Can you take a half day? Can you tell your boss you'll work till 2 o'clock, which is more than working a half day? And then you come out to Hauser. Hopefully the weather is good. I don't think it will be. The projections are pretty nasty, which again, one last scenario, boys. Could you imagine playing the 8 o'clock game Friday and you're not able to actually get that game in on Friday night, or you have to suspend it, then go and play it the next day in the morning? The loser is potentially playing 3 games in that day, in the next day. And that's hoping that there is no more rain delays on Saturday. You see why Florida State wants to go first, get their game in, and kind of set themselves up in what should be an interesting weekend. in Tallahassee. But before we wrap up, thoughts on other NCAA regionals? What do you guys think?
I mean, I brought up UNC earlier. That's one that stuck with me since Monday. I just think that's a super difficult one. I mean, I think it will be fairly chalky. If I had to guess, I'd probably take at least 13 of 16 advancing national seeds.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it when it was coming out. Like, I was just like, there's just not many 2 seeds that I'm just like, I feel like they're going to go and win that regional. In North Carolina, when they released North Carolina's regional, I was just like, how is this even possible? Like, it was absolutely crazy to me. But I will be really interested to see how Oklahoma State fares in Alabama's regional. I just think between the 8 teams in these 2 regionals that are matched up, Oklahoma State is by far the most offensive of those teams. I think they've hit 137 homers this year, and they're number 2 in the country in homers. So, obviously there's a reason they're a 2 seed with that offense. They probably don't pitch it too well, but they do have a couple of arms starters-wise that have racked up a ton of strikeouts this year, and their FIP is much better than their ERA. So I wonder if getting away from the launching pad at Oklahoma State helps them out. But so I'll be keeping my eye on that one, like we were watching Oregon State last year. But yeah, in Florida, Miami, that'll be a fun watch, I think. And Southern Miss's regional is also really good. I think Jacksonville State, who their 3 seed, probably easily could have been a 2 seed. And then they have Virginia as their 2 seed. And if they get healthy with the offense, we know they can be really, really offensively capable.
I think I'm with you. Obviously, keeping an eye on Tuscaloosa and seeing what that happens for, obviously, direct parallel between the Noles and the Tide and the regional pairing. The Gators and Canes will be interesting. Troy, don't sleep on the Trojans. That's a good baseball team that had Southern Miss down to the wire before the grand slam that they gave up in the walk-off. That was incredible. And I think that's
the most fun.
It is. I think Ole Miss is winning the Nebraska regional. I think Arkansas will win the Kansas regional in Lawrence. And can I also throw a West Coast shout out to Oregon State, a little Civil War. I will be getting back to the house.
That was wholeheartedly unintentional by the selection committee, though.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Got it. Agree with both of you that Carolina kind of got screwed. Tennessee is the 2. East Carolina and VCU is tough. I actually heard through the grapevine Tennessee and Coastal were the last 2 teams that were on the radar to go to Tallahassee.
I think I'm good with Coastal.
Me too. That's one thumbs up if you guys are watching. Tennessee would have scared the living daylights out of me.
I just feel like he's getting hot at the right time. Maybe not even that hot.
Boons is really good. Landon Mack's getting healthy. They get Chapman back. They're playing well. They have pedigree, right? Like those kids expect to win. I can't believe Carolina has to face Tennessee. That's a super regional matchup.
Since we said that, they're definitely going 0-2, and Coastal's going to win the FSU regional.
And I'm sure Kansas fans are mad at me. Arkansas will win that one, and I should give more respect to Nebraska. I really like that baseball team. A lot of juniors and seniors, and it'll be electric, I think, in Lincoln.
I was going to say, I think the atmosphere in Lincoln and probably in Lawrence are both going to be pretty enjoyable to see because places that are kind of starved for it. Morgantown's always fun because they have fun. That's their natural order. I am interested with Bird Ball in Athens, but I don't think it will matter. I think Georgia's just too good personally. But that place is kind of small, and if you're hitting them well that day, you never know, you might steal one. And VTech and UCLA is going to win that region, but like VTech intrigues me at times with what they can do on the mound. It's super inconsistent, but like at times it's also really fun to watch.
You joke about Georgia. Georgia's got to prove that it can handle ACC teams in the postseason.
Hey man, I was there for that one. Where does Path ever to Omaha? Yes, they're in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, not just Florida State. Nee, I'm talking Duke has beaten Georgia twice. NC State's beaten Georgia in Athens. The joke kind of writes itself. Like Georgia hosts a lot throughout the postseason and then doesn't deliver before Omaha. And it's usually at the hand of an ACC team. So can Bird Ball do it? We'll see. Brett, what you got?
You got to pick NC State at Auburn, don't you?
One last ride for Avent.
No, I hope they lose. I hope they lose horribly. Go Auburn. It's rare that I'd ever say that in my life, but I am in this case.
Do we think Wake takes down West Virginia in Morgantown?
No. I still think it's going to be chalky overall. Yeah.
Wake Kentucky's a good game though. It'll be interesting. I'm guessing both those teams will be forced to throw their ace in that game because of that.
Yeah. And Wake didn't throw their ace against Pitt, hoping that they would face Florida State in the ACC tournament, and that did not go well. I don't think Tom Walter can hold Lavonis out twice in a game that has to be won. But yeah, that should be a good one too, boys.
Yeah, I'm looking through it. USC was so interesting with the RPI, but it's be interesting to see how they do at Texas A&M being the 2 seed there.
Very much so.
That's all I got though.
All right. Well, I think that should be it for this episode 188. Nee, I told Chris Nee before I need him 15 to 20 minutes, and I forgot to add an hour and 15.
It's all good.
It was going so well, and we were enjoying having you so much that we ran it all the way through. But appreciate you, Chris. Thanks for joining us. You do great work, man, at 24/7 Sports, you and Brett. And you'll be on site this weekend covering, you and Brett?
Yep, I'll be there, as will Brett, and we'll have a photog there too, so we'll have photos from it too.
Should be a full one. Brett, anything else to add, or are we ready to rock and roll, ready for Friday at 3 o'clock?
No, I'm ready to hit the road tomorrow.
All right, drive safe, my friend. Appreciate you both joining us here. That's going to do it for another episode of Sunday Gold.